We'll be back with a woman whose daughter was killed by the Manson family. Serious stuff. Let's meet our next group of challengers.
Number one, what is your name, please?
My name is Doris Tate.
Number two.
My name is Doris Tate.
Number three.
My name is Doris Tate.
It's up to our panelists to find the real Doris Tate, and even after these many years, it's still a very upsetting story. Please follow along as I read the affidavit. I, Doris Tate, am the mother of actress Sharon Tate. For years after my pregnant daughter and 6 others were brutally murdered by the Manson family, I was immobilized by grief. But when the parole hearings began for Sharon's killers, I realized my destiny was to speak out for those who couldn't, the victims. I began circulating petitions, and each time a killer appeared for a parole hearing, I was able to present hundreds of thousands of signatures urging their continued imprisonment. I am a director of Parents of Murdered Children, a group that consoles and seeks justice for people who have lost a child to criminal violence. I speak to the inmates in prisons about the pain and suffering they inflict upon the families of the victims. My friends wish I'd put the horror behind me, but I can't. Families of victims can and must survive. Signed, Doris Tate. Ron, we'll start the questioning with you on this very serious subject.
My heart goes out to you. When someone is sentenced, as Charles Manson was, to life imprisonment without hope of parole, number one, why does he come up for parole so often?
They are allowed to come up for parole every 7 years.
Every 7 years. Number
Yes.
two, how many different prisons are the Manson and Akins and the rest of them? How many different prisons do you have to visit during this time?
3.
Number three, where did the tragedy happen?
It happened in Benedict Canyon, Cielo Drive.
Number one,
Cathy.
Number one, how do you feel with all the coverage that Manson gets and all these different exploitation kind of shows, always interviewing him? How does that make you feel?
Not great.
And number three, did you have to go through therapy yourself?
Actually, no. I withdrew for 3 years practically. I had no association with anybody at all. And then it actually took me 10 years to get over it. And I'm not over it, but it's 10 years.
David?
Thank you. Number one, Parents of Murdered Children. How many people are there in this association?
Well, I don't really know the exact number, but there's a lot of them.
All right, how long has this been going for? Number two, please.
Since 1976.
Okay, and number three, are there a lot of children who get murdered?
I don't know the statistics. I know that there's like 1,800 across the country that belong to this organization, 1,800 parents that belong.
I see. Number one, when you're talking to the inmates in prison, what is their reaction when you're lecturing them? Do they care, or are they sorry, or what?
No, they don't know me, and they don't care what happened to my daughter.
But,
Kitty?
Well, number two, to follow up on that question, I think what David meant was, do you feel that you're doing any good? Do they become penitent when you talk to these inmates who've murdered children?
Well, I can't speak for all of them because...
But you have had some
when
success.
when I go in, I don't know, what they have done.
But you do talk to them.
Oh, yes.
And number three, when this thing first happened, how many were there in the Manson family who were the murderers?
Well, actually, at Sharon's, there were 3 people went there. Tex Watson, Sharon, Susan Atkins, and Patricia Krenwinkel, and then Linda Kasabian was also there, but she was the lookout. She stayed outside and looked.
Thank you. Number two, do you go to other people's paroles? For instance, Squeaky Fromm, has she come up for parole?
No, I don't go to them. Just the one that killed my daughter.
Thank you.
All right, time's up. You have to cast your votes for the woman you feel is the real mother of Sharon Tate. Is it number 1? Is it number 2? Or is it number 3? Ron?
they were all so well prompted and taught. My heart went out to all three of the ladies. For whatever reason, number two can kind of nodded at certain things that's a good point to get across. And somewhere in your eyes, number two, I see Sharon.
Kathy?
I thought they were all great, too, and my heart goes out to every single one of them. And I would say, though, I thought number 3.
David?
Well, I agree with you. I want you to know I thought it was number 3. Number 3 is beautiful, and so is your daughter.
Kitty?
It could be any one of them, and it's a terrible story. I voted for number 2.
All righty. Let's review the votes. No votes for number 1. 2 votes for number 2. 2 votes also for number 3. And now we'll find out who the real voice of the victim is. Will the real Doris Tate please stand up? It is number 2. Mrs. Tate, you've been at this for a long time, and as we all indicated, it's a very serious subject, but you have managed to console a number of other people, and as a matter of fact, you have helped found an organization that has to do with victims' rights. Can you tell us about that briefly?
Yes, it's Coalition on Victims' Equal Rights. We are in 6 different regions now throughout California, and in those 6 regions, we have 7 attorneys available for victims.
Do you find that all too often victims are forgotten because as soon as the crime is committed and the victim is killed, that person is gone, and all of the publicity, all of the news reports have to do with those who are still alive, the families and the criminals. Is that really part of the problem?
That is part of the problem, and that's why I take on this responsibility, because Sharon's case is probably, next to Kennedy's, one of the most infamous cases in the United States.
Well, it's good having you here today. Let's meet our imposters who are good, too. Number 1, who are you, ma'am?
My name is Ruth Reedy, and I'm a volunteer at San Antone Community Hospital, and I'll be celebrating my 50th wedding anniversary in June.
Well, congratulations. That's terrific. Number 3, there were 2 incorrect votes for you.
My name is Elizabeth Woods, and I volunteer on cruise ships.
Volunteer at cruise ships. 2 incorrect votes at $500 apiece, and that means the team will receive $1,000. And we thank you for being with us today on To Tell the Truth. We'll be back to play one-on-one right after this.